Game 2 of the regular season. The Knicks at the Hawks. The Knicks in Atlanta to take on the Hawks. Geoff, you want to jump in there first and give your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the Hawks are actually a pretty interesting juxtaposition to the Knicks because they're doing what a lot of Knicks fans wanted the Knicks to do. Like the Hawks have someone in Jalen Johnson's way. They have someone in Onyeka Okongwu's way, and they were just like, okay, John Collins, you're gone. And no, I'm not saying that John Collins is Julius Randle, no matter what other people think, like, oh, they both average 20 and 10. And yet, no, Julius Randle is a better basketball player than John Collins is, and maybe demonstrably so. But the Hawks are like, it would have been very easy for the Hawks to say, no, we have Trae Young. We just signed DeJounte Murray. We need to keep our marginally better players to be as good as possible right now. And the Hawks are actually risking taking a step back by giving the keys, quote unquote, the power forward keys to Jalen Johnson to potentially take 2 or 3 steps forward down the line. That was always the argument for Obi over Randall. Obi was a higher impact player in 2021, 2022. But I don't think anybody ever really truly thought, like, at this moment, Obi Toppin is a better basketball player than Julius Randle. Julius was going through whatever he was going through. The argument was always, is it worth it to take a step back and see if Obi Toppin, from a team impact standpoint, has a higher ceiling down the line? Could the Knicks do that? And how would, they get Jalen Brunson? Is it possible Obi Toppin pairs with Jalen Brunson better? We'll never know. But the Hawks are asking that question. And the early returns are phenomenal because Jalen Johnson looks just so good. He just looks like he's going to be a player in this league. I don't know. I think some people might be higher on the Hawks this season than I am. I don't know if they're going to win a playoff series. I think that would be the line. Like, if I was, an odds maker, I would set it at 0.5 playoff series 1. And I think that's pretty reasonable, but I do like the direction they're headed. What do you think about just the overall direction of the Hawks?
I agree with you. I love the overall direction. Like, I will say, do you think it is Jalen Johnson that's going to start? Because I don't think he's going to start. That would be my guess. I would guess that Saddiq Bey starts at the 4 for them.
Well, even if they go with Bey at the 4 over Johnson, which is it has merit. I actually think DeAndre Hunter, like him and it'll be kind of like an RJ Hart situation where they kind of just flip flop from,
right,
which has merit in and of itself because,
right.
I mean, DeAndre Hunter is another former lottery pick of theirs that move kind of unlocks him because you kind of see, you get to see him in different constructs, which is important rather than as a pure small forward. It's like, oh, maybe he's a small ball 4, and like, so that does have value. I'd be surprised if Jalen Johnson doesn't ultimately, like, we know who Saddiq Bey is in this league, don't we? Like, if I was Quinn Snyder, I would want Hunter and Jalen Johnson at the 3 and 4, and then I would want Saddiq Bey with off the bench because I think Saddiq Bey, his bench scoring brings value to the team. And he's just kind of a safer bet. Like, he's night to night, kind of know what you're going to get. And I would rather see what I have in the ceiling of this team with Jalen Johnson paired with Trae Young. And honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if they look to trade Clint Capella down the line and just fully unlock the Okongwu, Johnson, Hunter, Trae Young, Murray lineup.
I could see that, but I don't feel like that's what's going to happen. So I think I might have a different view on the Hawks team than you do, because I don't think they're going to really go this like full development route and just like develop Jalen Johnson. Like, to me, he doesn't work as well with that starting unit because of the shooting. So I think that Trae does need to be surrounded by shooters. You already have DeJounte, who is like a good shooter, but like probably slightly worse than league average, especially for his position. And you already have Hunter, who's like, again, like a good shooter, but, not like a top shooter in the NBA. Bay, who is a really good like volume shooter, but again, not one of the best percentage guys in the NBA. So to me, it's like I don't think you can afford to have Jalen Johnson out there with Trae Young, because defenses are just going to collapse the paint, and it's going to take away his lob threat. It's going to take his floater threat, take away his floater threat. And I don't think they're going to want to take a step back in that way for the sake of development. I think they're going to try to develop these guys, guys like Jalen Johnson. But I'm also excited about a guy like AJ Griffin, who actually does space the floor tremendously well and is literally 20 years old, which is insane. I think AJ Griffin is going to be really good. He's not terrible defensively, and I think his offensive ceiling is very, very high. So I think that he's going to play a lot more, and I think they're going to try to get more shooting out there between, like the guys that I mentioned, AJ Griffin, and I think Jalen Johnson's going to have a big role on the team, but I don't think it's going to be as a starter, and I don't think it's going to be, as a traditional four with Trae Young and the rest of the guys. So, I mean, we'll see, but that's kind of where I'm thinking about with the Hawks. I think I'm probably one of the guys that's like the people that you said is higher on Atlanta than you, because I think that they're going to be really good. Not really good, but better than expectations. I think their over under was like 42.5 wins. I have them going over that. I just think that Trae Young is going to have a major bounce back year. And it's easy to forget that he's like 25 years old and he's probably still like pre-prime. And last year he was used in like, I think in more of a suboptimal way early in the season, trying to have him mesh with DeJounte and play off ball more. And the fact is that Trae Young is who he is. He's an elite, heliocentric on-ball creator, one of the best in the game. And I think they're going to put him in that role fully again. And I do think Bay and Griffin being like providing the shooting around him is going to be helpful. And I could see what you said as far as like trading Capella, but I do think their center rotation is kind of similar to the Knicks. It's kind of funny, like between Capella and Okongwu. These guys are both nightmares on the boards, like especially on the offensive rebounding end, with Trae collapsing the paint and drawing a big. So I do think like this is going to be a really interesting test for the Knicks to match up against two centers that are so similar to the Knicks two centers in terms of like what they try to do with them. And I think they're going to surprise a lot of people. And it'll be interesting to see how the Knicks deal with Murray, who, I think took a sizable step backwards last year, trying to figure out how to play off ball. And both him and Trae try to figure out how to play off ball, and both didn't do it well. But he did improve his shooting, and he's going to give the Knicks problems because Grimes is going to be occupied with Trae, like, and then who are you going to put on Murray? It's going to be tough to say. Are the Knicks going to be fine with Brunson on Hunter? I don't know. It's tough to see where you're going to hide Brunson there. So I think they're going to give the Knicks trouble. I think Capella to me is like Mitch's greatest nemesis is how I view them for some reason. Like he always gives Mitch trouble. And we talked about the kind of centers who give Mitch trouble are typically like the stretch five types. Everybody else he can deal with. Look at what he did with the Cavs bigs in the playoffs. He can just deal with any other guy who's not stretching out the court. But Capella does give him problems. And they're really similar. Capella is a better rim runner. Mitch is a better offensive rebounder. So I think despite the star power that we're seeing in the game, from Trae Young and Jalen Brunson, I think the two guys that I'm looking at the most are going to be Capella and Mitch. So that's kind of my view on this upcoming matchup. So you have any response to that?
Yeah, just the reason Mitch struggles with Capella is because he gets caught in no man's land with Trae Young. You need like Capella. I don't think Capella would be as effective against Mitch if he didn't have such an elite point guard with the skill set that Trae Young does, specifically regarding his floater. Like if he had a point guard that was more threes plus layups, Mitch could it would be easier for him to guard both at once because he's asked to do that too much. Even with how good Grimes is at screen navigation, it just ends up a lot with Trae Young head of steam. He gets a lot of floaters, and Tibbs doesn't want to give up that floater to Trae Young. So Mitch now has to come out further from the rim, and Capella reaps the rewards of that. regarding what you said about the overall state of the Hawks, just one quick, I wouldn't see increasing Jalen Johnson's role as like tanking. I don't think that that's what they'd be doing. I think that it would be kind of a tweener thing. Where like, okay, maybe they plateau from last season or even take a small step back, but also maybe they're just better right away. Like that's why I compared it to the Obi thing, because like, yeah, maybe replacing Obi with Randall would have made them worse and they would have been sort of looking towards the future more. But like, if you look at the 2021, 2022 impact data, like maybe they just would have gotten better if Obi played more minutes, like,
I guess it's just
yeah,
like what does Jalen Johnson do well offensively that would, like, obviously defensively he's very solid, but what does he do well like offensively that would help create? Because we know what Obi could offer, like we could talk about that, but I'm not sure what Jalen Johnson could offer that would like somehow increase their ceiling. Even like in a multiverse where we look at all the different potential outcomes, I'm like, I see very few where Jalen Johnson increases their ceiling.
Well, he gives them an alternative look to the nonstop Trae Young Capella pick and rolls, which are effective. All of a sudden, you use Jalen Johnson as the screener, and you put Capella in the dunker spot, and it kind of offers a different look. When you do that with Bay or Hunter, they just kind of pop, and it results in Trae Young just getting a switch and going one-on-one a lot. I think Jalen Johnson would offer kind of an in-between role where he's setting a lot of screens that aren't center screens, but he can. I know he wasn't a good three-point shooter last season, and I'm not buying the Jalen Johnson three-point stock, but I do think he offers something as a three-point shooter. Like, he's not just going to shoot no threes. And so if he can pop, he can roll. I do think that does something for your offense if you're not – like when Capella sets a screen, it's a roll. When Saddiq Bey sets a screen, it's almost certainly going to be a pop. I do think having that versatility helps the offense and can help Trae Young.